Okay, so I understand that this is just your first 40 days in Toronto, and yet within that short span of time, you have achieved something, you know, for the Filipino community and, you know, the bigger community in general. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I heard that just by being a member of the faculty of law, you have become the first Filipino member or faculty member of the School of Law. University of Toronto.
So being a woman then.
And being a woman as well. And I also understand that you're quite young in comparison to, you know, the
rest of the faculty.
So I mean, these are some firsts, you know. Can you expound on that?
Sure. Okay. So I've also been told the same things, that there have been several ceilings that I've sort of broken on coming here, and that being the most prominent, being the first Filipino, or to be specific, I'm actually Filipino Chinese in particular, and I guess what I can say about that is two things. I think I take it as a kind of responsibility, first as a professional and as a lawyer, to represent my community, the Philippines and the Filipino Chinese community, everywhere I go. So first in the US and then here in Canada. But the second thing, I think, which is more important, as a law professor, now that I'm actually teaching students, there's a real responsibility in helping them think about the law, not just Canadian law or international law, which I'm supposed to be teaching here, but also to show not only the students that I'm teaching here right now, but also the other Filipinos in Canada, that there is a bigger world out there, and that if they actually want to travel the so-called path, which is less frequently, the road less traveled, so to speak, to become a lawyer, to become a law professor, those things are real possibilities. And I'm hoping that just by me being here and doing my job as what I'm supposed to do, that can actually be an inspiration or something that will make them realize that their choices are as unlimited as their imagination.
Anna, I understand that, you know, being a member of the faculty of law, you are in a very great position to influence or shape thinking about legal issues. They would say human rights and so many other things. So what can you say?
Well, right now I'm teaching Canadian constitutional law, so since I'm teaching it for the first time, I don't think I'll be influencing a lot of people with a particular way of thinking about it. But what I do bring to the table, I think, is I've graduated from law school about 10 years ago, and what I bring to the table here, I think, is all the experience that I've accumulated in those 10 years, starting from law school, my brief practice experience, clerking for the Supreme Court, and I also did some work as a consultant with the Philippine negotiating team with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front back in 2009 to 2010. And so I think those kinds of experiences even though I'm not particularly or conscious or aware of them, they shape or influence how I present certain issues to my students. And what I try to be very, very careful about is to make sure to always present two sides of the issue to them and teach them a way of approaching a certain problem, and it will be up to them to make their own conclusion. So I don't really try to proselytize or peddle a certain message, but I wanted them to be able to have an open mind and be meticulous about analyzing different sides of a certain issue. So that's one way of, I guess, imparting my knowledge and my experience to them.
Yeah, but you have a pretty good involvement in human rights concerns in the Philippines. Can you share that experience?
I wouldn't say it's a lot, but I've always been interested in issues involving religion and politics. And so when I was writing my research paper, actually at Harvard, the topic that I wrote on was Islamic law justifications for an autonomous Bangsamoro state. And so that paper led me to deep knowledge with the certain issues, and through that experience I was able to connect with certain people in the Philippines who allowed me to participate in these negotiations, and so I was able to look at it firsthand. I also had some, aside from human rights issues in the Philippines, I also worked for a human rights NGO actually in Israel, and also in that capacity I was able to look at human rights issues, particularly relating to freedom of movement between Israel and the occupied territories. And so with those kinds of experiences, I feel that I have a good grasp of I have a good background in order to be able to teach international human rights, hopefully later, to students here.